Welcome back to another episode of the Wealthy Lawyer Squad podcast. I am so excited to be sitting here with one of my good friends and the owner of this fabulous studio. We've been wanting to do this episode for a while, so I'm so excited to be sitting here with you today. So I'm going to give a little bio and then we're going to dive in. So I'm sitting here today with Melia Arnett-Archie, a proud mother of two girls, a law firm owner, and owner again of this fabulous podcast studio where we record the Squad podcast. And I'm going to read your bio right now. So through your journey as the founder of Modern Creators Law Firm and the VoiceBox podcast and Creators Studio, you've discovered the power of combining legal expertise with creative expression. So I know that's going to come up in our chat today. So as the owner of the Modern Creators Law Firm, you offer personalized legal strategies tailored to the unique needs of creative entrepreneurs, which I absolutely love, content creators and influencers. You deal with business formation and IP protection, so important. Simultaneously, I don't know how you do all of this. You're also the owner of VoiceBox Podcast and Creator Studio, where you truly do excel at shaping brand identities, including the Wealthy Lawyer Squad, through compelling digital media, content creation, and comprehensive podcast production services. And you're just awesome. And you're my dear friend. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And like you said, that we could finally make this happen where I'm actually in front of the camera with you and not behind the camera. So thank you for the invite.
I know you've been here for every single podcast recording, but
Yes.
usually just behind the scenes. So I'm excited. So I want to dive right in. I want to know about your journey, your entire law career. Where did you start? And we kind of know where you are now, but we want to hear the whole journey.
So my journey is a bit unconventional for a lawyer in that I started right out of law school at the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office and rose through the ranks there, as a misdemeanor prosecutor, up through felonies, and then actually had the honor to become chief community affairs advisor, leading the community prosecutions division for the office in my last few years, which is, really working side by side with the state attorney on community related issues for the office, which was fantastic. And so after about 7 years as a prosecutor, I married a wonderful man who was in medical device sales, and we relocated to Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I had about 9 months of being a housewife and realized it just wasn't for me. And so he started to, really push me to, step over into the corporate space. And I thought, no one ever makes the transition from, public service, being a prosecutor in-house. It was just such an impossible leap in my mind. And we were talking about mindset. And he's like, but who said? And why not? And so he really started to challenge me on my thinking about making this leap. And I did it and went in-house at a global medical device manufacturer as at the time I started in compliance and as a general business lawyer. And then one day they started to inquire about, interest in starting a global legal practice around privacy and security. Had no experience in it other than program development from the state attorney's office. And I thought, again, why not? Somebody's going to have to learn it. Somebody's going to have to do it. Why can't it be me? And so I raised my hand and said, I will do it. And they took a risk on me. And I started the privacy technology and security practice for the company, and started as a team of one, literally learning, building the plane while flying it, and built it to a team of about 10 before I left globally, and traveled the world for a Fortune 200 company, doing privacy technology and cybersecurity for about 10 years. And then I said, again, why not? Be able to live my dream and do what I'm passionate about, which is working with creators. At that time, it started to dive into content creation myself and really learning a lot more about the space, and realized I absolutely loved it. And even from in-house working with design engineers, that was where I was having the most fun, like in the creative process and being a part of that. And I knew that's really what I wanted to do. And so I talked to my husband about it, who was in full-time entrepreneurship, It's like, what do you think about, me leaving and stepping out? And, it's like, let's have a plan for, if we're going to have to, you think about, our selling our house and what the investment will be and downsizing to be able to do it to make sure that we aren't creating risk for the family. And, we did that. We set a time goal, some time on the calendar, and I leapt. And so here we are now sitting in the middle of my impossible dream being made true and making it happen every day.
I love it. I love it. I didn't realize that you had moved from Florida. I knew you were licensed in both
Yeah.
jurisdictions. So how long did you live in was it Michigan you
Yep.
said?
So we were in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Yes, it's a real place for 2 years.
Oh,
So,
wow.
and then we came back to South Florida because my husband left the company to start his all natural whole food pet store, which is now we own a national franchise.
Power couple.
And
Seriously.
yeah, no, thank you for
Seriously.
that. It hasn't been without, its challenges, especially now with us being both being in time entrepreneurship. But when he left the company and I was now leading the global practice, there was no reason to be in Michigan anymore. And so I'm like, can we go back to South Florida? And the company's like, why not? And so we relocated back to Broward from Michigan. So we were there for 2 years.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to something that you said when you were making the transition from, being a public servant, working as a prosecutor and that whole journey, and then you went in-house and your partner, your husband really was a big support system. Like what did that conversation look like
Yeah.
and how much of that support really helped you to take that step?
Yeah, it was everything. I had grown up and gotten really comfortable with letting my anxiety lead. And that's what I sort of used as a crutch. Like, well, I have anxiety. And it didn't stop me from doing anything ultimately. Like my whole life has been a series of impossible steps made possible and, just
Mm,
seeing miraculous things happen. So I'm a believer in that way. But it was always through, I think, the lens of just anxiety and feeling like if it didn't feel like that, then something wasn't right. And so when he challenged me in that moment to say, why not? And why are you leading with anxiety? It's not that it won't be present. It's not that it's not real,
yeah.
but why are you allowing that to be out front and really creating this extra layer of pressure that really doesn't have to exist for you as you
Yeah.
think about how your career is going to advance. It
Yeah.
was everything, and that challenge in that moment, and I just had to be honest with myself. Like I have been doing that, and let's believe not only that this is possible, but that I can actually enjoy the transition and not sort of think that it has to be so overburdened and overrun with fear and anxiety while I'm doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so crazy to me to think how many times in each of our lives and our careers, we either do something or don't do something based on what's going on in our head and the stories that we tell ourselves and how we may stop ourselves before we ever even take the chance, before we ever
Exactly.
even see how it's going to play out, you know?
For sure. And I mean, it's even taking what might be standard in an area. It's like, oh, well, who makes that leap from,
Hmm. Yeah.
criminal prosecution to in-house, having never worked in a law firm and, not having that experience. But, that was my challenge in that moment is to recognize that, I had something to offer and to be able to talk about that, I had
Yeah.
to be able to see it for
Yeah.
that. Right. And not from a deficit, but no, I really had amassed, the necessary experience throughout my career. It just looked different than maybe someone else's.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. And so that made all the difference in the world when I went to the interviews was to be able to sell it that way because people literally buy what you sell.
Oh, yeah.
And if I'm going in there and I'm not believing that I'm deserving to, hold this seat and to be in this position, how can I possibly convince somebody else that I'm deserving of it? So
Right.
that moment and that conversation really was life changing for me and even
Yeah.
getting me here into entrepreneurship.
Yeah. And then tell me, when you decided to really go full swing into entrepreneurship, what was the impetus between, by starting the Modern Creators Law Firm? What was the impetus behind it? And what was the thought process going from corporate to on
Mhm.
your own.
So this is a podcast about money mindset, right?
Yep.
All
Yep.
right, so let's be honest. Um, I had grown a lot in the company and I was making a lot of money, right? With, a lot of annual incentive and all of these comforts
Mhm.
that they afforded. And I realized along the way that I was making decisions based on money,
Mm.
which when I became sober to it was terrifying for me because I vowed that, I would never be driven by money. Of course, we want to make money and we want to make a lot of it, but in doing so, to be making decisions that are more connected with and aligned with purpose.
Yeah.
And that's the way I'd always lived my life. But now all of a sudden, I'm making a lot of money, and we have this, big comfortable life. And I realized that I had disconnected from ultimate purpose
Mm.
because of the money, the fear of losing that.
Yep.
And whenever you're making decisions from a place of fear like that, you're limiting yourself.
Yep.
And so I had to go back and do some work and in therapy. And I know you talk about it a lot on the show, and it's so important to really shift my mindset around how I was making decisions about my future and my family's future,
Yeah.
um, as it related to my feelings about money.
Yeah.
And when I did that, I realized that, okay, my time is really up in this place. And the only reason that I'm holding on to it is a fear of losing the money, which means I have now put a cap on my next season
Yep.
and my earning potential outside of this company. And so I had to really challenge myself and be willing to make the leap and to reconnect with purpose. And now be in a place where then my money is attracted to me instead of me chasing the money.
Yeah. I think the lens through which we make these decisions in our lives is so important. And I think so many times we kind of just think things are the way they are. This is how much money we're always going to
Yeah.
make, or this is the area of law that I chose, so I have to stay in this area, or this is geographically where I live. And I love how you're breaking it down and talking about, you know, anxiety leading decisions or money leading decisions. How many times do we
Yeah.
all do that? And then we do become misaligned. We become out of alignment with what we want to become and our purpose. And as time goes on, that can start. I mean, I've been there. It starts to feel really icky. It doesn't
Yes.
feel good.
That's right.
It doesn't feel good. And the more you go down that path, I think sometimes the more stuck we feel with those golden handcuffs. I mean, I certainly felt that way in big law, and I knew by starting my own firm that I would take a huge pay cut.
Yeah.
And I knew that that would be okay because, like you said, there was a cap at that point.
Yeah.
I didn't want a cap anymore.
That's
And
right.
I knew that that was going to be scary. So I think that, especially as lawyers, we're very risk averse, but being able to step back and say, okay, what's my
Yeah.
purpose? What do I need to do to get there? And how can I reframe the decision making before I actually take these steps? And how important is it to choose good people around us? I mean, it doesn't
Mm.
have to be your spouse, your life partner, it can be your friends. Because what if someone had said to you, well, you know what, maybe that's a really bad idea? Or, I don't know about that. How many times in our lives do people want to keep us safe?
That's right.
So, I mean,
No,
that's
that's so
huge.
good. And that is so, so, so true. Because, the old saying goes, you are only as good as, the five closest people to you.
Yep.
And it's so true. I consider it like my personal board of directors. These
Yep.
are the people that are always going to challenge me. They're always going to speak to me out of a place of truth. And they're always going to dare me to challenge myself.
Yeah.
When they see me putting limitations in, that might be a spouse, that might be a sibling, that might be a colleague, that could be a mentor. But I think really being able to identify, okay, who sits on my board of directors that refuse to allow me to stay stuck, complacent, and will challenge me into purpose at all times
Yeah.
is super duper important so that those people can be identified and speak into your life even when you've reached places where you might be stuck.
Yeah.
Because it happens, these golden handcuffs, it happens over time. You may start in an area out of a place of purpose. And like me, and like you said, it was true for you, you look up and it's like, oh my gosh, like now I realized I've moved into a place where, I'm misaligned. And somebody else outside of you may be able to see that in a way that you cannot.
Yeah.
And so I think that board of directors is crucial for your life.
Yeah. And I think that I forgot in the bio to mention that you're also now a law professor. And I think having people who are in law schools and have these tools and this way of thinking is so huge
Yeah,
because, I think your board of directors changes throughout your life and what phase you are. But, in the Wealthy Lawyer Squad, we have a lot of lawyers who are part of the community, a lot of, new lawyers, a lot of law students. And so I think the fact that these students at St. Thomas here in Miami I'm so happy for you, that
thank
are going to
you.
get access to you. I mean, and you're going to be teaching professional responsibility, which I think has great opportunities to talk about this stuff. But just the way that you hold yourself out and the way that you live your life, I think you're exactly what we need in law schools. We need people to see that you can do whatever it is you want to do and you can choose one path and then pivot and then completely excel and thrive in whatever it is that you want to do. You can work with creatives, which I think is so cool and so needed. I mean, you are going to have a job for the rest of your life. Like literally, people are just figuring out, I
Yeah,
think, the protections that they really need. And so many people are going off on their own and becoming entrepreneurs. So I'm so happy that the students will have access to your gifts and to your mind. Truly, because that's how we change things. I mean, you might be on someone's board of directors, maybe not officially, but when people are going into law school and they feel, pushed towards a certain path, whether it's by their parents or the law school, or they're not able to see all the opportunities for them. I mean, just like with your husband saying, "Hey, you can do it." What if one person in law school, one law professor, one admin was just like, "Hey, I like that idea. You could do that." Or maybe you should explore that area of law. Just one person can change the entire trajectory of our lives and our careers.
absolutely.
It's so crazy. So I think this leads really nicely into a recent question that I got from one of my students in the Wealthy Lawyer Squad. So she wanted to be anonymous, but her question, and this has been coming up a lot, has to do with feeling confident.
Mm.
So I work with people who are going through really new stages of life, law school, scary as hell,
Yes.
and starting your first, lawyer job, or maybe you're transitioning between areas of law or moving from a small firm to a big firm like I did. And
Mhm.
I created a whole host of things going on in my brain. So she wanted to know, what are some tips that we would recommend, as she's new, right? She's a
Mhm.
second year associate. She's very, very new. What are some tips that you would give her to feel confident as she starts a new job as a second year
Yes.
associate?
I think that's such a good question and such an important topic, because I think we all, at different points in our career, have felt intimidated, overwhelmed, insecure. My very first tip would be, one, make sure you know yourself, right? I think through all of the pivots and transitions that we might go through in the law, I think the challenge is to always be able to come back to the center. Who am I? What do I care about? What do I
Yeah.
value the most? And to be able to answer that question of, am I remaining true to who I am?
Yeah.
And some of us,
Good
I
space.
certainly didn't. I didn't arrive at law school knowing that, right? This is something that over the course of my career, my life, I'm still learning and it's evolving. Like you said earlier, there's going to be different iterations of this, but doing the work, whether that's through therapy, whether, through your, spirituality, whatever it is, to really get clear on who am I?
Yeah.
Because once you know that, it's hard for people to shake that from a confidence perspective, right? So even if I
Oh, yeah.
have I'm in a season where maybe I'm comparing myself to other people in law school, or I start my career and I'm looking at other associates, or other people starting with me, I'm like, am I as good as those people? Or even as we get more advanced in our career, there's always going to be these opportunities to fall into these places of insecurity.
Yeah.
But if you know who you are, you can always come back to the center. And the second thing I think is checking in with yourself.
Yeah.
So one thing that I started later in my career, I wish I'd started earlier, even in law school, is to check in with myself.
Mm.
For me, it was every 2 years. Am I coming back to the center? Am I still who I know I am, who I was created to be? Am I still living from a place of purpose? Am I still
Yeah.
doing things that serve that purpose? Or have I started to drift based on what society is telling me I should be doing, based on what, external circumstances are dictating I should be doing? Or am I staying true to that core purpose and central theme of my
Yeah.
life? And then when sometimes, honestly, the answer to that was no. And I would realize when the answer was no, my confidence was way down. Why? Because I wasn't playing for my strengths. I was picking up pieces of other people's path and
Mm.
other people's voice. And I was trying to fit my square peg in their round hole. And of course, I'm insecure because I'm not being me.
Yep.
I'm not
Yep.
being me. So check in with yourself regularly. And then, do it. Do it. Understanding that a lot of times the steps that you're taking to live out that destiny, that purpose, you're going to have to be a little afraid, right? And if you're ever at a place, I think, where you don't have a little fear, you might not be challenging yourself enough, because you
Yeah.
should be living so big. It should be at times terrifying
Yeah.
and overwhelming.
Yeah.
But then going back to that board of directors is, who are those people that you can check in with to keep you centered and to keep you grounded and to keep you focused and encouraged along the path. So I think those would be my tips for someone in law school that's really, struggling with confidence, or thinking about, how do I maintain my confidence, overcome insecurity. One, know you're always going to have it. It's going to creep in,
Yeah.
but come back to the center, check in with yourself, and make sure you have people around you that can help you when you're feeling low.
That's so good. Professor Arnett-Archie in the house. Like, it's so good and it's so true. And I don't know why we don't talk about this more in the law. Like, knowing who you are, and that could change, and that's okay. That can evolve. We all are constantly evolving. But who are you? Like, you get to pick. You get to pick. Don't let everyone kind of sway you, and I think that's why it's so important to do that
Yeah.
exercise before you even go into law school. Why are you going to law? Like, it's not even just all about the law, but why are you going to law? Why are you
Hmm.
going to law school? Who do you want to become? Who do you want to be? What do you care about?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that should be like, let's talk about that from day one, because
Yes.
then you can make decisions as you move along, and you can drown out, because law school tends, and I think different law schools do this differently, but it tends to
Mhm.
force everyone or push everyone into certain silos. And it's like, no, you get to choose. You don't have
Yeah.
to get pushed, you
And I
really
think
don't.
for me, my path has been so different from traditional paths, whatever
Hmm.
that means these days.
Yeah.
But I think what it shows is that if you know yourself and you're willing to take risks based
Yeah.
on, who you are and what you're capable of doing and what you're capable of providing to clients, to the people that you're purpose to serve, that you can make those pivots and you
Yeah.
can have a path that looks completely, untraditional, and be successful.
Yep.
But when we don't trust ourselves because we don't know ourselves, we start to allow other people to decide
Yeah.
our direction. And that's, I think, dangerous. And that's how we look up one day and we realize, maybe I'm making a lot of money, but I'm so unhappy. I am miserable. I am not fulfilled. And
Yeah.
that's sad for me to think that any law student would be starting a career and not understand, like, listen, there's going to be many iterations of you, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
That is okay.
Yeah.
And you have to decide what success looks like for you. If you
Yeah.
are letting the stats decide that, because listen, my life doesn't fit into any stat.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Like
Yeah.
it wouldn't make sense. Like I would be the anomaly in in every statistical analysis of a lawyer's career. But I've seen success because I've been willing to challenge myself into those places and
Yeah.
say, it doesn't have to look like anybody else's path.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah. And knowing that by being true to yourself, you will be more successful and you will be more abundant and the money will come. Knowing
Absolutely.
that and taking away that leading from the fear and the lack, and knowing that money is abundant. And there's really cool ways like you have done to combine your vast legal experience with a creative space. I mean, how cool is that? And it makes so much sense. It really does. Like when you look at it, you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. It really does. But I would gather that maybe along the way, people are like, I don't know if I really get that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think even the niche around, creative, working with creatives, influencers, creative entrepreneurs, that's new.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
people are still like, what is that exactly? Like, it's a
Yeah.
mashup of what? And,
Yeah.
let
If you know,
alone
you
to
know,
think
but you
about, right, right. The combination of the creator studio. But again, it is being confident enough to be an astronaut.
mm,
Can you be the first?
yep. Yeah.
And that does take, it took me years to get here. I wouldn't have.
Same.
So I look at some young lawyers now, and you've had a few on your show, that are so brave,
I know.
that have, come right out of law school, maybe practiced for years or not, right out of law school and started their own firms.
Mm-hmm.
And the level of courage and bravery
Yeah.
and confidence
Yep.
that it takes to be able to do that, I can only hope that, everyone in law school, new lawyers would have, whether you choose to do it or not, but there is something here
Yep.
that is really guttural, like that, a grit.
Yeah.
I think that is refreshing to see, I think, in, law students and new lawyers that I certainly didn't see being pervasive when I was graduating from law school back in 2003,
Yep.
right? I'm sorry, 2006. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that is what it takes, though, to really be able to rise to the ultimate level of what your success definition is.
Yeah.
Eventually, you're going to have to
100%.
come to that decision point.
100% and be bold. And I think a lot of people are just fed up. They're like, this is not working. The legal industry is not working for me.
Yes.
I'm going to just do it on my own and create my own path. And I applaud that because it took me a very long time to get there.
Yeah.
So I agree when I see younger attorneys doing their own thing or creating their own path, I'm like, wow, that is
Well,
amazing and
and not for
kudos.
everybody.
And
And let's
not for
be clear
everybody.
about
Right.
that too,
Right.
because again, I think we can, spin, shift too far to the other side of the spectrum where it's like, everybody needs to
Right.
leap and go out and no.
Nope.
Everybody's path is going to be different. And that's why
Yep.
knowing yourself and coming back to your center and to your core and knowing sort of what my path is, because I had to be a prosecutor first. Like that was
Yep.
a central part of what my path needed to be. I needed to go in corporate to learn, how to do it on somebody else's dime. That was
Yeah.
largely beneficial. So every twist and turn in my career was beneficial to where I am now.
Yeah.
Right. And I wouldn't give that for anything. And for some people, they just may not need that. And so don't
Yeah.
do that because somebody else is telling you you have to.
Right. 100%. I absolutely agree. I think there is a trend right now where everyone's just trying to do it on their own. And it's like, no, you really have to take stock of who you are,
Mm,
what you want to be, who do you want to become, what your skill set is, and go from there. And there's
absolutely.
so many ways to be successful, whether you're on your own, you're in government, you're in corporate, you're in a big law firm, small law firm, your own law firm. It doesn't matter. Just pick a path that feels good for you. And like you said, do those check-ins
Yeah.
constantly, 1 year or 2 years. Hey, am I good where I am? Does this still make sense? Am I on the right path? I think that's incredible advice. So speaking of advice, I want to ask you, what is your advice? If you could go back to
Mm.
1L Malia, what advice would you give yourself in general? And then what advice would you give yourself when it comes to money?
Mm. So my advice to myself in general would be just what we're talking about from a confidence perspective, because I remember showing up to law school and being um, so overwhelmed for a lot of different reasons. No one in my family had gone down the path. I
Yep.
didn't have any idea what I was really getting into. Sitting, being the minority in multiple ways as a woman, as a Black woman,
Yeah.
and you just feeling like, okay, like I am trying to figure out so many things at once and be successful in the
Yeah.
classroom
Yeah.
on top of all of that. But if I could tell my 1L self anything, it would be, girl, you got this. Know that you have this and don't be afraid to ask for the help that you need.
Mm,
There's so much
yes.
faking. I think coming in as a 1L, right? It's because like I've got to put on this facade of I've got this and
Yep.
I'm this and I'm posturing, I would say,
Yep.
that it really I think limits your ability to be vulnerable, to say I'm not okay with my mental health.
Yep.
I'm terrified.
Yep.
I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling like I'm about to break. I remember going home, my one after probably the first couple of weeks of school, and I was just like, "What in the he's have I done?" And I just literally slid down the wall of my apartment and just
Oh,
had a cry fest.
oh,
Right? I needed some help, and I'm talking about mental health
yeah.
help.
Yeah.
Like I needed someone to talk
Yep.
to help me find my center and to find my, my core belief, remind me and to be aligned with who I am. And I did not have that, and nor did I know how to reach out and ask for help. And I would tell her, like, get help. Like, how you're feeling is okay. It's
Mm-hmm.
appropriate. You are not crazy.
It's
You are not the
normal.
only one. You are not alone.
Yep.
Avail yourself of the resource. I'm sure there probably were even resources back then, but am I going to be the one admitting that I'm not okay?
Right.
No. So that would be it. And then around money, it would be learn it. I came into my law career having no perspective on money, right? Not having learned it from my family, not having examples of people who had, really pivoted in their money mindsets and found successful ways to deal and transact in money and avail themselves of opportunities that would, um, you know, allow money to be attractive versus chasing money, all of the things that we talked about. And it would be take a step back to do the work so that
Mm-hmm.
you're not chasing money, afraid to talk about money. I was so challenged with my money, really until recently, even in corporate, making a lot of it.
Yep.
What do I do with it and how do I make it work for me and to my benefit?
Yeah.
And so, just recently, really starting to, okay, I have to make the investment in learning how money works,
Yeah.
how it can work for me and my family, and then how to align everything that we do
Yeah.
so that, again, we are not afraid of money. I grew up being so afraid of it.
Same.
These were
Same.
conversations that was just like taboo. Like, don't have it.
Yeah.
And so you find yourself really misaligned with
Yeah.
money. So that would be it. Like invest in learning it.
Yeah.
Pause long enough to become a student, reading books, asking for help, investing in seminars, whatever it is that
Yeah.
now,
I was gonna ask, so books.
yes, reading. I mean, first that's the first step is, law students won't have a ton of money or time to invest in, maybe programs and things like that, but you can always pick up a book.
Yeah. That's where I started too. I just started reading books. I just Googled like top finance books and
Yes,
I just started reading. And then I realized very quickly it's not as complicated
it's
as I
not.
thought it
It's
was.
not. And then people, are available. So, you have people if you are aligning yourself, with the community, right? That you need.
Yeah.
You will have people that are better at money than you.
Yeah.
That can start to like point you in the right direction. Like, have you thought about this? Or, maybe you should talk to this person, or maybe there's this program that is within your budget that you can start taking small steps to
Yeah.
really open your mind up to all of the things. But again, that board of directors is super important because these should be people that know more, that have gone further, that have more experience in these areas that can
Yeah.
then start to point you in the right direction. And so that would be it for me is one set of board of directions. Make sure there's a money person on it
Yep.
because none of this makes sense if you don't have the money part figured out.
Right. It's so interconnected with your mental health, with the decisions that you make, which with the opportunities that you have. I mean, you can't separate them.
You
You
can't.
really can't. And I think once you start to do the work around money and money mindset, it becomes so much less scary and it actually becomes fun to talk about. It
Yes.
becomes something that you might talk about with your friends. Maybe not your family, depending on, how that used to go with your family in your own home. But it's one of the reasons in the Wealthy Lawyer Squad, we actually started the Money and Mindset Book Club. So every month we're reading a new book about money, mental health, or often both. and then talking about it. And especially for the law students who are in the
Oh,
squad, if they don't have time to read a whole book, they can come and listen and hear the conversation or read the Cliff's notes, and I think it's just starting there, just changing the taboo, taking the taboo away and saying we can talk about this, we can become educated, and it's not that hard. It's not that
yes.
complicated. Is I think I'm excited. I'm excited for our first
Yes.
our first book club
And I'm
meeting.
so happy you're doing that, because again, it is needed at the
Yes.
1L level up through the first two few years. I mean, beyond forever, it's needed, but especially
Yeah.
I think that's such a critical phase.
Yeah.
I remember graduating from law school. I mean, I
No
knew
idea.
nothing about money. I knew I wasn't going to make a lot being a prosecutor. And again, mindset. I was preparing to be poor. Like, think about that
Mm,
because of everything that I didn't know about money and the possibilities. I just settled in, like, I'm just going to be poor
mm,
for however long that I'm
yeah.
doing this. And,
Yeah.
we'll see what's next. I had no plan for, how to make the little that I had work for me because you always have enough. You do. And I think that's the abundant mindset is I'm working out of a place of enough, of more
Yeah.
than enough.
Yeah.
The question is, what am I doing with what I have? Right?
So good.
What am I doing
It's
with what I
true.
have?
It's so
And
true.
so because I was at, such a scarcity mindset, I didn't do well with what I had.
Yep.
The little I had, I didn't do well with that.
Yep.
Right. And then I started to make a lot of money and I realized I'm repeating these patterns. So it wasn't about the amount of money I was making.
Nope.
It was about how I thought about it and how I didn't think about it. Because I'm finding myself going through these same cycles of
Yeah.
scarcity because my mind is
Oh my God.
scarce.
I'm getting like goosebumps so much in this episode. It's so true. It's so true. And people don't realize this and how much it impacts everything.
Everything.
Like everything. Wow. Okay. That was amazing. I think we should just end on that because that was like literally mic drop, professor in the house. Seriously, I'm so happy that you're teaching. I'm so happy that you're going to bring this energy into the law school world because this is what is needed to make change.
Oh, thank you. And just to give you a shout out really quickly, and just talking about, those people that you have around you, it was because of really availing myself to a network of strong women like you that I could even make a big ask to say when, I know I should be teaching. I know I have something to offer.
Yeah.
Again, not about the money, about
Yeah.
the opportunity, right? To be able to give out of a place of purpose. And I put that ask out to our group to say, the Daily Drip shout out,
Yes.
does anyone have connections? And you were the person that sort of made the connection at the university that I'll be teaching at. And so thank you
Oh
so
my
much for
gosh.
that. But this
Of
is the
course.
power of aligning yourself from a place of purpose, not
Yeah.
being scarce, because the old scarcity mindset would have been like, I mean, that ask is too big for me. Like, who am I to think I could be a law school professor? But no, like now that I know who I am and
Yeah.
connected with that purpose, I made that ask and you showed up for me. So thank you so
Of
much for
course. Oh
that.
my God, I would do it a million times over. And you're so deserving and worthy of that opportunity and to be there. And I think again that it's where you need to be because we need people like you who are positive, who are empowering, who are going to show these students this is what you can accomplish. And you can try different things and you can pivot and it will all work out exactly as it's supposed to. So I'm so happy for you. And I'm so glad we finally got to record this episode. This was so good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Wealthy Lawyer Squad podcast. I hope everyone loved this episode. I had a blast. I literally kept getting goosebumps. So thank you, Melia, for coming on today. And you don't have to go far now. Back to
Yeah,
your office.
so true.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.